fun. Why don't y'all look tired? Do you guys want to stand up and do a stretch break? Let's everybody stand up because I can't give a talk to a really tired crowd and you guys look like you're dying out there. Hour and a half is a long time. I will talk while you're stretching. Shake it out together. This is my Twitter handle, and I know we don't have Q&As, but if you Q&A me on Twitter, I will respond. I also really like feedback during my presentations. I read all my Twitter stuff, so it's at Sara Critchfield, and I'll look up the hashtag MSA as well. So, okay, I'm going to not pace as much as the previous two people. I am going to go over a lot of stuff that Richard just talked about, and I'm going to slice it in a different way and tell you how Upworthy looks at it. So, for those of you that don't know, Upworthy is a social media content aggregation company that aggregates content with a pro-social message. So we do stuff like climate change is real and you should do something about it, like income inequality is a problem and you should do something about it, that kind of stuff. We launched 2 years ago with that many fans, and 2 years later, this is the state of our subscriber base. And email isn't on here, but with email, we've got about 7 million subscribers at Upworthy right now. So it's really exciting for us because people told us when we launched, this isn't gonna go anywhere. Like, people don't wanna look at important content. Nobody cares about Afghanistan or whatever, they just want Kardashians. We've been able to engineer through virality and reverse virality, engineering a system that does engage people with social content. So we feel happy about that, and this is some of our charts. We've been called the fastest growing media site of all time. This is us compared to Business Insider and HuffPo. We're pulling 40 to 50 million uniques a month at this point, and so people often say, like, how do you do it? And this is how we do it. We take virality very, very seriously. So when Upworthy started, we thought, if we want to bring lots of attention to really important topics in the world, how do you do that? Most people start with that question by saying, we should create lots of information about social topics, right? But we said, you know what, the internet does not need more content, right? That's the one thing the internet doesn't need. The internet needs filtration, amplification, distribution, and so instead of focusing on content creation, we decided to really concentrate on how to lift up and amplify other people's voices. And so we study virality, we measure everything we do. We're really a data organization, even though on the outside we look like more of a content organization. And so I'm just gonna talk to you a little bit about our findings here. So virality, the analogy is actually medical, right? It's about making lots of people sick. You want to turn lots of people into zombies. It's kind of a gruesome analogy, but I think about the comparison between, a good way to think about this is thinking about maybe the common cold versus swine flu. So if I have a cold and I'm sitting in a room with 5 people, there's different, the cold is contagious, right? But there's different factors that come into whether or not they're gonna catch the cold. So if I sneeze right on you, achoo, you might get it, you know? But if I sneeze into my hand, achoo, maybe no one in the room will get it. If I live in the same, maybe everybody that's living in the same house as me is gonna catch my cold, but my neighbors aren't gonna catch my cold, right? Now, if you compare that with the swine flu, which is like, I have the swine flu and I'm sitting in a room of 5 people, they're all getting it, I don't even have to do anything. And that's why we quarantine people with really highly contagious diseases like the swine flu. So even though a lot of people, and this is just a point that Richard just hit, which is even though a lot of people have had the common cold, more people than, let's say, have had swine flu is more contagious. Swine flu is more viral. So virality really means people-to-people spread. It's not about how many people saw the thing. You know, this is really important. I see people getting this wrong all the time, and I think like some of the leaders in the field are trying to just get the correct definition of virality. So it's about this chain. You infect somebody, they spread the virus, there's a new exposure, they contract the virus, and then they do it again. You want to get into that virality loop, and in order to do that, you have to look at all of those different factors, such as, am I sneezing on you? How many people are in the room? Do you live in my house or do you live next door? So Upworthy's looking at not only the actual virus itself, but all the other factors around the virus that makes it spread. We use a virality ratio, which is views over the next generation over views next generation over views this generation. You're looking for each successive generation being larger than the last generation. So if I have 100 people that look at a piece of content, this generation, generation 1, and in generation 2, 110 people see that content, that's a 1.1 virality ratio. I've got a viral piece of content. So I went to YouTube and I looked at their top 100 most viral videos of 2013. And even YouTube is defining viral by page views, right? It was essentially just a list of top viewed videos. And I went into their stats section and looked at some of the charts. So Gangnam Style is a great example. I mean, arguably, the most viral piece of content we've seen in recent years, almost at 2 billion views. But look at that chart. It's beautiful. That is a thing of beauty at Upworthy. You can see that. You can see the actual peaks of first generation views, second generation gets higher. First generation views, second generation gets higher. Okay, so you can see it in your charts how viral. It's a very easy visual example. And the reason why Gangnam Style has tapered out is because there's always a saturation point. Like nothing goes to infinity, but this is stretched across 2 years. So this was an incredible piece of content. This is very, very viral. Now I compared it to another piece of content. Jennifer Lawrence wins Best Actress. It got 7 million page views. So, how many of you in this room would love to get 7 million page views on something you're working on? Like, we would all love that, but does that necessarily mean that it's viral? And I think the other factors that went into this, you can see how different this chart was. It was a huge peak and then it died. And it's because it was a hot topic. Everybody wanted to hear about it like that day. It was a media frenzy, and so it, a lot of media outlets hit it. So it started with a huge seed group, because this was the hot topic of the day. But the content itself wasn't viral. It wasn't compelling people to keep it going and sharing. So again, virality means that each successive generation is larger than the last generation. I would have defined this as not viral. I know that there are probably some people that would define it as viral, and there's some nuance in that, but I'm gonna skip these 2 examples in the interest of time. So how hard can it be? And my stats really add up to the stats you just saw with Richard. 45% of our posts don't break 25,000 views. And to some folks, maybe some folks in this room, 25,000 views is a lot. But considering that Upworthy has a 7 million subscriber seed base, that's kind of bad. Like 50% of our stuff kind of bombs. So when I hire people on my editorial staff, I'm like, hey, your job is to fail 90% of the time and succeed 10% of the time. That's about a typical curator at Upworthy. They fail 90% of the time in the sense of they don't get huge reach on about 90% of their content. But those big hits are very meaningful to us. And the reason, just to tell you a little bit more about Upworthy, is that we have a theory that we don't want to give great speeches to empty rooms. Like, it doesn't matter if the message is great if a lot of people don't see it. And so we just hit it every day, harder and harder. Like, how do we get more and more people to see these things? So that's kind of where we're at. So again, just to kind of review, we've got these variables, right? It's contraction rate, transmission rate, size of exposed population. And at Upworthy, we map these to clickability times shareability times spread. So most people have been just looking at shareability, and for content creators, that's the thing that you control, like how good is this piece of content. But when you look at the numbers on the previous slide, which is that it's like winning the lottery to actually get an actual viral piece of content, that middle piece, that shareability piece, is extremely expensive to optimize. So Upworthy said, hey, we're not gonna create content. We're gonna take other people's content, we're gonna optimize those 2 things on the end, the clickability and the spread. But essentially, if you're working with across all 3 of those lines, you'll be able to pull different levers at different times in order to increase your virality. So to talk about clickability, it's number of clicks over number of impressions. If 100 people saw my thing and 10 people clicked on it, then I have a 10% clickability rate. And clickability is about packaging, and it's about figuring out, why do people click on things? So instead of saying, the inherent shareability of a pop song like Gangnam Style over an article on Afghanistan, you just really can't compete, right? Like, it's just harder to increase the shareability of an article about about Afghanistan. But if you change the packaging on it, you can get more people to enter in. And so traditionally, like we found when I go to news conferences and stuff, journalists are saying, it's user apathy. People just don't care about Afghanistan, and people don't care about anything. And they do. You just have to make the packaging that much more enticing to get people in, because it's a little bit harder of a product to dive into, if you will. So I love this milk analogy, and I love watching people. Do any of you guys do you watch people at the supermarket? Is that like a weird marketing? I'm like, is this a weird marketing thing? You guys are marketing people, right? Okay, I do. I watch people in the supermarket. And I'm fascinated by why they choose something over the other thing. People almost never look at ingredients. They almost never think about what's inside, right? They scan very quickly. They're in a hurry. They got to pick up their kids from soccer practice, whatever it is. And so they're looking on the outside. So you can change how that decision is made by changing the packaging, and you don't have to change anything inside the packaging. So for milk, it's like we're all used to those boring milk jugs, right? Like we all grew up with those milk jugs. But by making it, putting it in this cool glass and putting on this cool neon lettering, they're increasing their chances that more people are going to buy this kind of milk over the other kind of milk. And that's great. That's marketing, that's packaging. But what about shareability? How many of those people who grabbed that milk off the shelf are willing to evangelize that milk to their friends? And I'm going to guess probably not many, because at the end of the day, the milk in the ugly packaging and the milk in the cool packaging taste the same. It's not something you're going to get so excited about that you want to call up a neighbor and let them know, right? So you can kind of pull the clickability lever with milk with something like milk, but it's really hard to pull the shareability lever with something like milk. You can pull the shareability lever maybe if you make it strawberry milk or chocolate milk or mango milk. No one's made mango milk yet. Maybe that would do it. There's a lot of different things you can test. Shareability is essentially number of shares over number of views. If 100 people grabbed that milk, how many people are going to want to share it with their neighbor? And then finally, you have spread, which is number of impressions over number of shares. So, and the spread depends on the share method, and that's sort of a really tricky thing for what you guys are doing, because you can't control a lot of Facebook algorithms, Twitter. It's hard to know. Like if I'm someone sharing something on Facebook, do I have 250 friends or do I have 2,000 friends, right? And so the number of impressions is sort of dependent on those individual people. You don't have a lot of control about that. We really advocate building your email list. And an email list is a smaller spread. You only get one impression per one share, right? So it's a little bit smaller. It gets larger if someone will blast email like 10 of their friends at once. But the email list is something that you have control over, and it's not something that Facebook can tinker with or Google can tinker with or whatever. Now, when you think about spread and share and the location of the spread, you also tie that. We're thinking about tying packaging to that. So if you're on Twitter, your packaging consists of 140 characters. If you're on Facebook, your packaging consists of a headline, an image, an excerpt maybe, and a share text. That's a much bigger packaging to work with and test and play with than you've got on Twitter. And on email, you're working with two packages. You're working with the subject line, and then you're working with what's actually inside and how that's presented. So you have to sort of tailor your clickability to the method of spread to increase your virality levers. Are y'all with me? This is the most wonky talk I've ever given. I usually talk about content. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the math behind it. So viral does not mean lots of people see something. Viral usually correlates with lots of people seeing something, but it's not what it means. It means that each person that views the content successfully recruits more than one viewer. Okay, and successfully recruits is the thing, because I could sneeze on you, but if you don't actually catch the cold, then I haven't really given you the virus. So here's a sample viral chain. It's really simple math, and I'm doing a math-oriented talk because if you care about your content, you have to care about analytics, and you have to care about the math behind it. And so when we hire folks, like when I hire folks at Upworthy, they're like, okay, like I'm down with all this stuff, but I'm not a numbers person. You know, I'm an editorial person, or I'm a content person, or I'm an artist, or whatever it is. I'm not a numbers person. It's scary. You absolutely have to get over that fear, and you have to dive into your analytics if you want to accurately judge what you're doing. And I know, like, there's a transition for that, and some places have whole departments that just do it, but you've got to do it. So here's a very unintimidating equation here. If you have something like this, you've got 1,000 initial viewers, you have a 10% share rate, you've got 100 Facebook impressions per share, and a 4% click rate, that equals 400 next generation views. So you had 1,000 initial viewers, it went through that virality chain and came out with 400 on generation 2. That's not a viral piece of content. Now, maybe you say, all right, I'm going to pull one of those levers. I'm going to get some better content and increase one of those levers. So you do the same equation with a 20% share rate. You got like a way better piece of content. That's only gotten you 800 next generational views. You're still not viral. So you can increase your share rate by 20%, which, by the way, is almost impossible to do. This is just for illustrative purposes. So you can increase that, but you're still not viral. So let's say we want to optimize something else. We're going to get better packaging. All right, now we've got 20% share rate, still stayed with 100 Facebook impressions, but we increased that rate to 5.25%. Now you've got 1,050 next generational views. That is a viral piece of content. Does that make sense? So you're pulling different levers throughout the chain in order to influence the outcome. And by the way, this correlates with Pageviews too, but talking about. The point is every optimization helps. You've got to look at clickability, shareability, and spread. And if you're purchasing, or if you're looking at working with companies that say, I'll help you get your content seen by more people, you really want to ask them, like, do you think of it, you want to stay away from the people who say, I can make your content go viral, and you want to veer towards the people who say, I can optimize your content for virality. Huge, huge difference. No one can make your content go viral. I mean, it's just the impossible thing to do. But lots of us are working on how to optimize content for virality, and that's the types of people that you want to be hanging out with. And I run into people all the time that say, but I can. Even people on my staff say that sometimes. And I say, all right, and I'll ask you guys this. Who in this room would have, 3 years ago, seen Gangnam Style and thought, yeah, that one. That's going to get seen by 2 billion people. Is there like anybody in this room that would say, I wouldn't have picked that. I would not have placed my bet on that one, I mean, there's things that go viral all the time that I'm like, are you kidding me? And people have different formulas, like you just need an emotional story arc, and then it ends like this, and then everyone will share, and you put an ask here, and it'll be great. But I'm like, okay, that's cool, but like, how do you explain Gangnam Style? Like, if anyone can explain that to me, I will give that person the prize for being able to predict virality. So it's not about prediction, it's about optimization. So we see that the views of this generation matters quite a lot, but it doesn't matter for virality. The first generation size doesn't tell us what's viral. So here's just one last final case study example, and that is, what if I have a virality ratio of 2, which is impossible, you never will, but if you have, theoretically, okay, according to the math, if you have a virality ratio of 2, you can start with a initial viewership of 1. Because a virality ratio of 2 just means that this generation of views is double the next generation of views, right? So for every 1 person that sees the view, or that sees the content, 2 people are going to see the content in the next generation. So if you extrapolate out the generations, you go until the entire world sees it. And that's what happens when you have a virality ratio of 2. So the higher that you can pull that virality ratio, the lower seed audience you need to start with, okay? Now look at this example. We've got a virality ratio of 5, which means that for every 1 person that sees it, they're successfully recruiting half a person in the next generation. So you start with a way larger seed audience of 50,000, but you're halving it every time. So you're going to 25,000, and then 12.5, and then 6.2. And at the end of this chain, only 100,000 people would see it, even though you started with 50K, which seems like a sizable audience. And that is virality ratio of 0.5. So it's very important to measure your virality ratio and to measure your clickability, your shareability, your spread, to measure those things separately, so you can hold yourself accountable to actually making good content, and you can figure out like which are the levers that we need to work on. Like maybe you thought that your stuff wasn't getting seen because it was really bad content, but maybe it's great content. Maybe the clickability is just really low, or maybe you're doing spread wrong, maybe you're doing audience building wrong. So this is a way, when you separate it out, to hold yourself accountable. Kind of to tag on that a little bit, we've had, Upworthy's gotten a lot of press of like, oh, you guys are just clickbait and that's all you are, and certainly our headlines have been a strong tactic that we've used inside of this ecosystem of click, share, spread. But what our copycats have done has taken that tactic outside of the ecosystem and just used it on its own, and it's not working for them, you know? There's no integrity or success in having like a clickbaity headline if the people don't actually like the content. And so we actually look a lot at our shares, and if people aren't sharing the content, we adjust, right? So the reason that Upworthy is working isn't because we figured out how to do good packaging, even though we figured out how to do good packaging. It's because we figured out how to do good packaging and put it on shareable content that people like and they'll actually share. You can't get around that. There's no easy fix. You can't make bad content be better content. I always say to people who come to us, if you've got a bomb, I can make your bomb go further than you can, but I can't make it not a bomb, you know what I mean? And so that's why it's really important to get good at pulling some of those other levers, because the actual content itself is hard and expensive and time consuming to adjust. So great. So I hope you feel smarter than YouTube now, because you guys know what virality is and YouTube clearly doesn't. And most people don't know what it is, and now you can tell them all about how you do and look really smart and maybe even get a raise. It does not equal lots of page views. You've got to look at that virality coefficient, and it's got to be higher than 1 to be viral. And so I'd recommend that you start measuring clickability, shareability, and spread to interpret your success more accurately. And then the 3 points for those are optimize your clickable packages to get people in the door. So change that milk carton, okay? Look at your generational 2 views to judge great versus just average content for sharing, and hold yourself accountable to that. If nobody's sharing your video, like, it's not good. Work harder on controlling spread, aka audience building, and thinking about adjusting both the packaging and share method per method of spread. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, they need to be dealt with differently. And finally, I just hope you, that was a fun one. Stay classy. Thank you for having me.